The first flake drifted past my window at 111 Ayuming, a shy mote of light quivering just beyond the pane. I had been awake for 31 hours, editing one more line, as though the novel on my laptop were a submarine holding its breath at impossible depth. My red pen leaked onto the desk the second I heard it. The faintest hum, pearly and precise, a single note that vibrated in my molars like a tuning fork no bigger than a seed. That, I muttered, pressing my forehead against the glass, is impossible. Outside, a second flake spiraled downward. It shed an octave as it went. One more flake, then a chord, three more, and the alley behind my apartment bloomed with the fragile harmony of some celestial music box. I yanked on my boots, grabbed my coat, and clattered down 4 flights of trembling iron stairs to the street before I had time to doubt the evidence of my ears. By the time I reached the curb, the night air was thrumming. Nobody in Harbor City ever slept properly. Too many neon signs pulsing through bedroom curtains. Too many ambulances scissoring through dreams. But tonight, the insomnia felt different. Windows were sliding open up and down the block like a series of slow silver dominoes, heads of every shape poked out, faces startled and soft in the glow, students clinging to deadlines, cooks just off shift, security guards about to clock in, cab drivers waiting for a hail that never came. Each of us held still as if we were trying not to snap a delicate thread running through the dark. Snowflakes that sing individual lullabies fall upon restless city rooftops, coaxing insomniacs to share dreams over cocoa. The words reached my mind without effort, as though the snow had printed them directly on the inside of my skull. They tasted warm and bittersweet, like the childhood mug that steamed between my mittened palms each December. I half expected the building across from me to sprout a theater marquee proclaiming the same message. Instead, a woman in flannel pajamas leaned far out of her fourth-floor window and shouted, "Did you hear it too?" I cupped my hands around my mouth. Hear it? I practically breathed it. She grinned, the wind fraying her ponytail into sparks. Stay there. An instant later, she disappeared from her window, re-emerged at the front door, and crashed into me. She introduced herself as Layla, a barista who specialized in latte swans no customer ever noticed. Insomnia, she confessed, had been her oldest friend since she was 12. Now it cracked each day down the middle like a poorly blown glass ornament. Layla stuck out her hand as though we were at a job interview for a dream. Do you want to find the source? I blinked at her pajamas, her bare ankles, her visible astonishment at her own question. Of the music? She pointed upward. The snow was thickening, but not the way a storm thickens. Each flake spiraled slowly, deliberately, giving us time to watch it sing its solitary line before ultimately joining the chorale that hovered like a half-visible aurora above the rooftops. There, she gestured toward the Stanton Hart building. A triangular office tower topped with a freestanding terrace, rarely used by anyone but maintenance staff. A faint glow rimmed its edges. Before we could decide on a plan, a city bus screeched to the curb. The doors folded open, revealing an older man in a pea coat, gray curls escaping his beanie. You two getting aboard or staring all night? The interior was empty, but for him and a high schooler wrapped in fairy light necklaces, her eyelids painted antique gold. The driver up front seemed equally surprised to have passengers. He kept twisting to look at us in his mirror as though we'd materialized from vapor. We didn't discuss our route. We simply moved deeper into the city. Each block carried new evidence that the lullaby snow had shaken something loose. Couples danced barefoot on balconies. Neon signs dimmed themselves to gentle pastels. Cats sat calmly atop lampposts, eyes closed in perfect trust. More people waved us aboard at sporadic stops. A violin teacher who clung to his instrument case like a newborn, a postal worker with midnight blue lipstick, a welder holding a toddler wide awake in pajamas decorated with rocket ships. We spoke softly, as though the entire bus were a nursery where the world's anxieties napped for the first time in decades. Every window displayed a different constellation of flakes. Some glowed amber, some jade, some faint amethyst. When one melted against the glass, it left a fleeting pattern, a measure of sheet music so fine you needed eyelashes for magnifying lenses. They vanished in seconds, as if memory itself were the chalkboard, forever clearing room for new melodies. At City Square, the driver braked, then removed his cap with slow reverence. "End of the line," he whispered. But the Stanton Hart building still loomed another 6 blocks away. Before any of us could fret, the teenager with fairy light necklaces stood up. "This is where we get off," she said. "Trust me." The sparkle in her eyes defied argument. We followed her, like pilgrims, through streets swaddled in silver. Snow traced each gutter, each door handle, each bike rack. It did not pile, it transformed, lining steel in soft illumination, outlining brickwork like a jeweler etching final flourishes. She did not ask who. At Armitage Street, we found the first cluster, 6 strangers huddled around a card table set dead center over the manhole. On the table, a pot of cocoa steamed. They lifted mismatched mugs skyward, catching snowflakes in the vapor, so the music spiraled into the chocolate like cinnamon. Each sip triggered a visible dream that billowed from their lips in pastel smoke. One dreamed of piloting a hot air balloon above kaleidoscopic reefs. Another dream smoke revealed a quiet kitchen where someone who'd been gone for 10 years hummed while slicing pears. "Please," said an accountant whose tie was speckled with luminescent snow, "take a seat, share your sleep with us." We might have complied, surrendered to that delicious pot, had the Stanton Hart glow not flared brighter, an urgent pulse. Layla squeezed my arm. "Later," she promised them, "we'll come back." We turned up the next block and found a fire escape draped in vines that had no business being alive in December. They spilled blossoms lucent as dew, each petal a low note in the deeper register of the flake fugue. A sign taped to the first rung read, "This way to the first dream symposium." Leela laughed. "I guess the snow is organizing events now." We climbed. The vines parted for us, their flowers still singing. On the roof, an elderly woman in a winter cloak rocked an antique phonograph, not connected to anything. She was guiding its brass horn through the snow like a butterfly net, catching the lullabies, then twisting a crank so the machine amplified them. An audience of neighborhood dogs reclined at her feet, ears twitching like velvet metronomes. The woman refused payment, request, even compliment. She simply bowed to each new arrival and motioned onward. By the time we reached the Stanton Hart entrance, 4:03 a.m., there were 50 of us, maybe more, and not a single one felt like a stranger. The revolving doors slid apart before we touched them. Lobby lights dimmed to a sleepy bronze. The security guard waved us through without speaking, his monitor showing nothing but stationary static. Elevators binged in unison, offering themselves. None of us pressed a button. The car just started ascending, guided by a tempo only it could hear. Lullabies infiltrated the shaft. You could feel chords resonating through the steel, blessing each bolt. When the doors opened onto the rooftop terrace, I forgot to inhale. Snow formed a dome that floated 2 feet above the gravel, an almost solid sphere of harmonic crystals. Each flake orbited with gentle purpose, leaving curved trails of faint light like lines of latitude. At the dome center stood 2 figures, a young man in a bicycle courier jacket and an older woman draped head to toe in quilt squares stitched from hundreds of fabric strips. The courier spoke. "I'm Amir. This is Mrs. Vasquez." His voice vibrated with treble, hers with bass. Together they produced an interval so consonant it felt like a spinal adjustment for the universe, Vasquez said, her accent rolling every R like a lullaby itself. "We merely heard them first and asked permission to gather everyone." "How did you ask?" a violin teacher requested. "By dreaming aloud," Amir answered. Mrs. Vasquez fell asleep for 32 seconds. I stayed awake to catch her dream smoke before it faded. Once I held it in my palms, the snowflakes tuned to it, and here we are. A hush layered itself across the terrace. Under its weight, I noticed that no one's breath steamed. The air temperature felt mild despite the snow, like early September in a coastal town. The lullabies arranged themselves in polyphonic ladders, each rung inviting the next. Layla raised a hand. "What do we do?" "Whatever you need," Amir replied. "Listen, sing, sleep, share." Mrs. Vasquez produced a thermos the size of a torch and began ladling cocoa into cups that seemed to multiply whenever someone reached for one. She explained that the cocoa contained, among its usual comforts, shavings of cacao grown on her late husband's hillside, beans fermented beneath stars so luminous they left freckles on the skin. "You'll dream, but also remember," she promised. I accepted a cup, warmth pulsing through ceramic into finger bones that had forgotten softness these many months. The flavor was thunder slowed to a purr. Sweet, yes, and bitter, but also humming with something older. than sugar or beans. I remembered being 5, watching frost lace the inside of a school bus window, believing each pattern a map to someplace kinder. Beside me, Layla finished her cup, then another. Ivory smoke curled from her mouth, forming a small, glowing bird that perched atop her head. The bird opened a beak and projected images: a coffee shop deserted at dawn, her tamping espresso with perfect precision, a woman who might be her future self, asleep at a quiet hour, face slack with gentle dreams. A hush rippled as snowflakes swirled closer, eager to listen. They hovered near the dream bird, harmonizing in the key of hope. Somebody sobbed, not despair, but relief. One by one, cups drained, dream smoke bloomed, and the lullaby dome thickened its weave. The accountant exhaled, a carousel where bills balanced themselves elegantly before dissolving. A cab driver conjured a highway, suspended through clouds, trafficless and bright. Even the teenager with fairy lights offered a dream. A classroom without clocks, no standardized tests, the chalkboard streaming, Aurora script teaching the art of quiet attention. I hesitated, half devoted to erasing myself inside the spectacle, half afraid of what my own subconscious might reveal. The novel waiting on my desk at home was about a broken family who never learned to fall asleep. I had tried to fix them sentence by sentence, but their yawns remained claws, their blankets knife-edged. What if I had no gentleness to offer? As if sensing the question, a snowflake the size of a quarter landed on my nose. Its song was tiny, but absolutely unafraid, an ascending major sixth, resolving down into a hush. The chord told me every word I had ever revised was just a step toward this moment, the point where I let the story slip beyond the page and joined the shared inhale of strangers. I sipped the last of my cocoa. The steam rose. Image after image assembled inside it. My mother reading books aloud while braiding my hair. My older brother teaching me how to whistle, failing until I tried pretending I could make music with nothing more than breath. Myself at 80, still awake at 3:00 IMing, except now the city outside sleeps peacefully because I have finished writing a lullaby into every building's foundation. Gasps circled me as the smoke took shape and soared. The flake dome parted to allow the dream to ascend higher, where it burst like a slow, silent firework. Shimmering syllables drifted downward. Once upon a midnight shimmer, the snowflakes memorized each letter, adding counterpoint rhythms. Somewhere, a bell tower chimed twice, then reversed the sound so the second note rang before the first. Amir and Mrs. Vasquez nodded to each other as if a silent tally had been met. They extended their arms, palms upward. The lullabies coalesced into a broad ribbon that looped around the terrace, through every listener's chest, threading us. My heart clenched at the coolness that followed, like the remnant hush after crying. "What happens now?" Layla asked, voice hoarse with wonder. "Now," Mrs. Vasquez said, "we carry it back down." But carefully, Amir added, "dreams are fragile as ice until they're shared twice." As dawn glimmered along the waterfront, the lullaby snow slackened, leaving ordinary white drifts underfoot. Yet if I listened closely, the music persisted in the memory of each footprint crunch. We moved in loose procession to the elevators that waited obediently. First floor, the city smelled of petrichor and chocolate. Everything looked unchanged, yet the neon signs flickered not from malfunction, but from a need to blink sleepy eyes. The air felt as if it had inhaled a lullaby and was holding it on its tongue to savor. People parted around us, eyes bright even when heavy-lidded. Leela slipped her arm through mine. "Back to Armitage Street?" We found the card table exactly where we left it. The accountant and his companions were packing up, but when they saw the subdued glow around us, they set the mugs down again. Someone produced more cocoa, we took seats, and I realized the plot of my novel had shifted, unwritten chapters humming behind my ribs. Over the next hour, we traded dreams, punctuated by mouthfuls of melted snowflake song. A municipal gardener confessed a secret hope of planting flower beds in the median of the interstate. A software developer envisioned code that lulled servers to sleep rather than pushing them to nonstop productivity. Each confession distanced us from the jittery, caffeinated compulsion that had once labeled itself ambition. By 9, the sun breached the skyline. Puddles formed where the magical snow melted. Surprisingly, the streams did not wash the music away. Instead, they carried it, tiny, rippling staves of notes flowing into storm drains, entering the subterranean labyrinth the way orchestras slip backstage before a concert. I walked home with Layla. Her eyes drooped, but not from exasperated fatigue. She was drunk on the promise of real rest. Before parting, we exchanged numbers written on the backs of thermal receipt paper. "Call me when you wake up," she said, sealing the phrase with a yawn that sounded like a kitten easing into sun-patched dreams. In my apartment, the red pen still bled across the desk, but I ignored the manuscript. I opened the window, daylight poured across the sill, and though no flake remained, I caught echoes. A lullaby reverberating somewhere in brick and wire, repeating an invitation to hush. I lay down, fully clothed. The next thing I remember is evening, a slow lavender sweeping the room. I had slept 9 hours without twitching. I wrote through the night, but not the novel I expected. Instead, I composed a short piece titled Guidebook for Future Snow, explaining how music might disguise itself as weather when cities forget how to dream together. I emailed it to half the people whose addresses I'd gathered on the bus and the rooftop. Within minutes, replies arrived, photos of subway riders reading my words aloud, voice messages overlaying my paragraphs with improvisational harmonies, a video of the elderly woman's dogs howling in perfect fifths. Leela texted at 2:17 a.m.ing one sentence, "Coco again tomorrow?" My thumb moved before my mind caught up. "Absolutely," I wrote. But this time we invite the whole block. Tomorrow came sooner than expected because I had napped again 2 hours before dawn. The neighborhood responded to hand-painted flyers taped beside elevator buttons, tucked beneath windshield wipers, woven into bicycle spokes. At 11 p.m., we hauled folding tables to the apartment roof, each guest instructed to bring either cocoa, a thermos of soup, or a dream worth telling twice. The first wave arrived with mismatched mugs, but also with guitars, spoken word poems, jugs of tambourine punch, an origami swarm of cranes that rattled like tiny tambourines in the breeze. No magic snow sang overhead. Still, we recognized the hush inside ourselves. We recreated its memory by humming a plain note in unison. It crescendoed into something that wasn't music so much as an open door. Halfway through the night, a light dusting began. Ordinary meteorologists would call it just a seasonal sigh. Yet if you tilted your head, the new flakes carried faint echoes. We hummed louder, and the snow answered, unison at first, then staggered entries, each flake choosing its lullaby. They had remembered us. I leaned over to refill Leela's mug. Her yawn curled into visible smoke again, though we had not drunk Mrs. Vasquez's special brew. The rooftop crowd grew silent to witness her dream. A coffee shop with no hours, where customers paid by leaving lines of their favorite bedtime story. As the image dissolved, Amir handed her a notebook for sketching floor plans. Mrs. Vasquez offered quilt squares for cushions. Someone asked if we were building a revolution. I shook my head, savoring a mouthful of chocolate and snow. Not a revolution, I replied. A nightly rehearsal. A gust scattered flakes across my eyelashes. Their lullaby was quiet, confident, city of waking, learn how to sleep without surrendering your heartbeats. City of neon, dim without shame. City of noise, hush without vanishing. The story of the lullaby snow will keep altering, depending on who drinks the cocoa next. Each retelling softens a harsh alarm clock, redeems a fluorescent all-nighter, teaches long-suffering brains to trade adrenaline for cadence. If some future winter finds you staring at the ceiling at 3:07 a.m., listen. The rooftops might be restless, but the snow is rehearsing its descant, and a stranger somewhere is saving you an extra mug.